Hi and welcome to this video where the focus has been about this cam carrier and removing the cams, replacing the chain and replacing the tensioner. So here is the tensioner, what's left of it, not a lot, and the chain. So that's the old chain as well, so that's now out. So I also noticed that the timing was slightly out on this exhaust cam. It was one tooth out by the look of it, because we're supposed to have 12 pins on the chain between the two markings on the cams, and it was 11 when I removed it. So it looks like as that tensioner destroyed itself, the exhaust jumped one tooth. Bit worrying that. Hopefully no damage was done to the valves. But yeah, so anyway, hopefully that's okay now. So it's all back together. It's all ready now to go back onto the cylinder heads. So that's next week's task, is to put the silicone round and mount that back onto the heads. But yeah, so hopefully you'll enjoy this episode. And can I ask a favour that if these videos are of use to you, that you perhaps like and subscribe, just to try and help support the channel. So, but anyway, hopefully you enjoy it, and thank you for watching. So we'll have a quick look at this cam carrier. So I've given it a bit of a clean up, but as you can see, there's still the silicone sealant around the edges of it, which will need to be removed. And there's the damaged chain tensioner that this has all been about trying to mend. Right then, so we'll crack on now and inspect the old timing chain. So I've set a few cameras up here just to try and have a look at this, because it's important that there's a certain number of chain links between the marks on the sprockets. So what I'll do is I'll just add a little bit of yellow paint there on the exhaust sprocket, and then if we go to the inlet sprocket, we can see the mark again there, but again I'll add just a little bit of yellow paint there just to make it a bit clearer when looking vertically down on this. Now we should have 12 chain link pins. Now this is where it's a little bit concerning, because we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 and 11. So it would appear that the exhaust cam has actually jumped a tooth. Now hopefully that, if it has jumped a tooth, which it does appear to have done, hopefully it won't have damaged any valves in the process. So we'll have a quick look at our new chain, because this one actually has some copper links on it, or copper coloured, and we'll just confirm this distance between the sprocket marks. And as we can see, my chain is definitely out by one tooth. So it was a good job I probably didn't rev this engine when trying to get it into the garage. So here is the broken tensioner, and you can also see the oil feed hole there next to it. So the next job is to now remove the camshaft bearing caps. So we'll have a quick photo of this. So we'll overlay the bearing caps onto this now, and there they are. They're numbered E1 to E4 and AA1 to A4. And you can also see the oil little portholes there to the cams, and again there on the left is the one going to the tensioner. So there's 3 oil sort of supply holes on that. So for this we need an 8mm socket, and we've obviously got the 8 bearing caps that need to be removed. Now they're not very tight. I think these are only done up to 10 Newton meters. So, because obviously they're going into like a cast aluminium housing there, which is obviously quite soft. So I'm just going to break them loose first off, and then we can just spin these and get all the screws out. So that's E1, and I'm going to keep these in order. It's very important they're all kept in order. And then E2, which is one of the bearing caps that concerns me because it seems to be bone dry under there. Just noticing there, absolutely bone dry on that. Now on to E3. So E is for exhaust. And then finally on this cam is E4. Okay, so then if we go on to the inlet, which is AA1, I'll try and think of that as air, as inlet. And then A2. So there's plenty of oil on this camshaft. A3. And then finally A4. So like I say, you do need to keep all those in order. Right then, so yeah, so why is bearing cap E2 bone dry? So if we take a closer look at E2, which is absolutely bone dry, E3 has got a little bit of oil on, yet the bearing caps on either side have got plenty of oil on, which I don't understand. So you can see the hole there that comes through on the cam. There's no blockage on that. So why on earth would this be absolutely bone dry? So that is quite concerning, because obviously that will have accelerated some of the wear on there. So I just hope replacing this chain and tensioner is going to be worth it, and that we haven't actually got a serious issue here with the cam. And some form of oil starvation. Anyway, so here's a couple of photos of that. So you can see the lack of oil on number 2 and number 3. So that is number 2 there. Absolutely bone dry. But anyway, right then. So now to remove the tensioner and both cams. Okay, so it's 8mm socket again for the 2 screws that are holding the tensioner on, or the remains of the tensioner. As you can see, there's no top pad on this one. The top pad has completely gone, and the chain has actually been gnawing away at the aluminium housing. Okay, so let's just pop the exhaust cam out. So the inlet cam is a little bit stuck there, but there's a seal on that, which will need to be replaced. So there's the remains of our tensioner, which is going to fly apart now and roll off somewhere. So if you just pull that seal out, like so, and then the inlet cam will easily come out. Like I said, now that's absolutely dripping in oil. So just as I move that, then you can see it's absolutely pouring in oil on the inlet cam. Now there's clearly oil on the 2 ends of this exhaust cam, and the oil enters in on the right hand side, and there's plenty of oil there. So I can't see how the oil would bypass the 2 central caps, bearing caps. That seems somewhat puzzling. I'm just going to absolutely clear. The holes are definitely clear, because obviously the cams are hollow, so they can actually fill up with oil. I do find that extremely curious, because as you can see there, the E3 exhaust 3 is also slightly dry, not as dry. And then obviously E1 and E4 have got plenty of oil on. And then this one's absolutely swimming in oil. We haven't had oil pour out of the other one. So this is sort of concerning me a little bit, because it's a lot of work to do if I'm going to put all this back together, possibly with a dodgy cam. But anyway, so here's a photo showing the wear marks on the cams. But anyway, right. So anyway, we'll clean things up a bit now and remove the old black sealant on the cam cover. So I'm going to use here a die grinder and a 3M Rolock bristle disc, which is 120 grit. Now Peugeot do actually say to use a liquid gasket dissolving compound, which I've never come across, but then I'm no engine rebuild specialist, but I do have these, and I'm pretty certain the 120 grit's quite gentle if you go around it gently. So it may not be technically correct, but they are quite effective. So yeah, you may wish to get the proper Peugeot compound to remove this silicone rather than use that. Now the only thing is, you obviously have got to make sure this is absolutely scrupulously clean, because there is going to be abrasive now on this cover, and it could possibly go through the oil filter. So anyway, I'll show you what these are, just out of interest. So that's the white is 120, the yellow is 80, and the green is 50. There's also a purple, which is even coarser, I think. Might be 30 or something. But yeah, I can't see I could have done any more damage than that cam's done being dry. But anyway, so there's a photo of that now. And again, you can definitely see E2 looking a bit different to the others. So it might be worth having a quick look at the old tensioner and compare it to the new one. So although there's not much left of this tensioner, it is worth just always comparing the original components with your new replacement, just in case there's a slight difference. Now they look okay, apart from obviously mine's missing some parts. And there's the release pin. Well, that's actually a rivet, but inside you can see there's like a sprung capsule, which is like a piston, which presumably fills up with oil and puts pressure onto the chain. So there's all the little bits I've managed to collect now since messing around with this engine. So hopefully I've got all of them out of the engine. Seems to be quite a little stack there. But anyway, so that's that. So I think I'll probably best check inside the exhaust camshaft for any tensioner debris. So what I've done is actually sealed the other holes up of the bearing caps. I'm going to spray in some carburetor cleaner, because that's obviously quite powerful. And hopefully this will dissolve any oil in there. And then hopefully I can flush that or drain it out. Give it a bit of a shake around first, try and get it in there and mix it up. And then hopefully if I then blow compressed air through this, I should be able to hear if there's any bits of plastic or anything in there that accidentally blocked that number 2 bearing cap hole. But again, the cam seems to be all nice and clear. So it's been dried off now with the compressed air. I can't hear anything rattling. So the mystery of the dry bearing cap continues. Right then, so now I need to soak the timing chain for at least 30 minutes in oil. So let's have a look at this new chain in a bit more detail. I'm actually reading the instructions here, so I don't actually make a silly mistake. So we have got a big warning label there saying soak the chain for at least 30 minutes prior to assembly. So it might be worth doing that. Now the only problem for me is it takes so long for me to put this car back together. It's likely to be at least a couple of months that this chain is going to still be sat in there. So I might put some of the other lube on that. So I'm just checking those links again, making sure we've got exactly the same number of links and nothing odd there between the two chains. And that all looks correct. So we'll pop it in there and give it a nice generous soaking of engine oil. And we'll leave that and go and do something else. Right then, now for checking the oil ways are clear to those cams. So here's a photo and I'll just highlight where the oil ways are to the cams and to the chain tensioner. So what I'll do is use a small piece of red wire, flexible wire, just to check these sort of holes are actually clear. So if I poke that in there, I should be able to just see the end of it poking through. So that's actually where it comes out. So I'm trying to establish these in my mind, because when I come to put the sealant on this, I've got to really make sure I don't get a bit of sealant on these oil ways. Otherwise we really will be in trouble, because no oil will get to the cams at all. And everything looks absolutely perfectly clear. So that's where the oil comes out there. Just loop that over so you can see that. And then again on this cam, it goes down that hole there on the right hand side and comes through again onto the cam. So that shows you sort of where those oil ways are. And I'm going to blow them through as well with some compressed air. They look perfectly clear. But let's just check. So I can feel the air coming out through there onto my finger, and I put my finger over that. So again, the mystery why I should have a lack of oil on the exhaust cam continues. I mean, actually, like I said, this car looks like it's been serviced quite well and that everything's quite clean. Right, so anyway, so there's the cam on top to show you where the oil ways are and how they match up to the cylinder head. Okay then, so now to fitting the timing chain and the new tensioner to the camshafts. So again, I'll just show a few photos here. So this is the counting of the chain pins between the marks on the sprocket. So as you can see, the marks are going between the centre of the two copper plates, which gives us the 12 chain pins between the markings. So there it is. Right, so we can drain this oil from the chain now. Without spilling any of it. And then what I did is I did just leave this at a slight angle there just to drain the remaining of the oil off before coming to fit it. But anyway, so let's have a look at this tensioner, make sure we get this in the right way round. So there's our little oil way there to the spring and piston inside the tensioner. Now I just want to confirm that it's definitely lining up with that hole there. I am somewhat paranoid. Like I say, if you've done these a few times, you're probably okay, but when you haven't, you really want to make sure everything's spot on and you haven't put it in and made some silly mistake. And then you've got to take all the engine apart again. So I'm just confirming that lines up with that, so I know exactly which way round the tensioner goes. Right, so let's have a look at these two sprockets now and the markings. So there's mark 1 and there's the second mark. So we should be able to take our chain now. So if you didn't have these copper marks, you could just count the chain pins, which would still be the same. At the end of the day, as long as there's those 12 pins between the marks, that's all that matters. So we're definitely on there, and we're definitely on there. So now what I've got to try and do is squeeze the tensioner in between. So I'm going to put a bit of Lucas assembly lube on this because it's very thick stuff. As you can see, it's very sticky, which is quite ideal considering this is going to be sat in the engine for quite a while. So then we just got to poke this tensioner in there, and then when we're located we can pull the little plastic locking pin out, and then the tension will be applied to that and hold everything together. So that looks all correct. So again, I'm just going to show the 12 pins. So there we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. I think you could call me paranoid on this one. Right then, so now let's fit the camshafts to the cover plate, or the bearing ladder as it's sometimes called. Now normally you would use something like the Lucas assembly lube on these bearings. I'm going to actually try and go with a paste because I know this engine's going to be sitting for quite a while, so I'm going to use this LM48 because it should stay there for the next 2 months, because presumably that's how long it would take me to actually get this engine back together. I think it took 10 episodes to get to this point. Hopefully I might be able to put it back together a little bit quicker than that. But either way, this is going to be sat there for quite a while I get all the accessories back on. So there we are, that's all nicely pasted up. So I should better lower the cams into that now very carefully. There we are. Typical, the chain would just fall off there. So I've pulled the pin out now, so the tension's on there. So the cams actually need to be pushed over slightly to seat them. There we are, that's that one in. And then the exhaust cam. Trying to be a bit careful there. Right, seems to be in. Timing marks. Paranoid's coming back in again, just checking those marks. And then what obviously I'm going to do is put the same paste onto the bearing caps. I'll try and speed some of this up. So this is like almost like a graphite paste. So hopefully this will keep things nicely lubricated while the engine's doing that initial start-up and where there's no oil. Obviously what I'll probably do is turn the engine by hand first, just to make sure we've got oil coming up there before actually firing the engine, to give it the best possible chance. I don't think it needs any more wear. It seems to have had plenty of wear on those camshafts by the look of it. Right, so that's the last bearing cap in, like so. So we just sort of spin those down a bit. So I'm going to do it all a little bit at a time, so that everything hopefully sits down nice and evenly. Now I'm going to start in the middle on the cams and work my way out. I couldn't see anything in the manual that said to start in any particular order, so I'm just going to go from the middle and gradually work my way out. Okay, so that's those lightly hand tightened. Now I'm just going to check also that this spins once I've put this together, because I want to make sure as that chain goes around that it actually is still lined up with the markings if I was to reverse it. So there's that old tensioner. I'm just going to put the old pin in there so I've still got it to hand if ever I need it in the future. So I'm just going to spin it around now, make sure everything's turning smoothly, and also check those marks are still lining up after the chain's been spun a little bit, which it is. So I'm satisfied with that everything does seem to be correct. I'm going to count them again just to make sure. I do suffer quite a bit of paranoia, I think. But anyway, so we can tighten these down now to 10 Newton meters with our torque wrench. Again, I'm going to just do a little bit at a time, so I'm just going to sort of take up the slack there and then pinch them tight to the torque setting. I'll do that on each one from this centre working outwards. So hopefully this is now all together correctly. It would be nice if this car actually did work properly afterwards, because it is actually quite a nice Mini. Okay, and then finally our tensioner. There we are. Okay, so that's actually ready now. Now I'll just show you what this Lucas assembly lube looks like. So if I put a bit on the chain, you can see actually how thick and sticky it is. It has got a lovely consistency. You can see that it's absolutely ideal for engine rebuilding. So I think I'll give it a generous covering of that before I put it back on the engine at the last moment. Right then, so here's some reference photographs which you can now pause to view for longer. So we start there with the cam before we started, and there's all our bearing caps and the different parts on there, and there's our oil feed to the old tensioner, what's left of it. So there's all the oil on the cams apart from number 2, which is absolutely bone dry. I still can't understand that. Makes me wonder if the oil pump's possibly getting weak or something. So we can see the score marks there on the bearing ladder. But anyway, and there's the oil intake. That's just to show the relation of the oil ports. And there's our 12 pins on the timing chain. So that's the marks on the sprocket, and then the mark on the inlet sprocket. And there it is, all back in there, and you can see the grey paste just oozing out from under the bearing caps. Okay then, and here's some outtakes. Oh my! What is it with this stupid thing? If you find this content helpful, that you, and I'm talking, and I'll just right, tosser. Hi and welcome to this video. Where it's been all about Hi. I hope you enjoy watching the video. Thank you. And cut. So you've been watching removing the camshaft chain and chain tensioner on a 2009 MINI R56. And thank you for watching, and I hope this video helps you service and maintain your car within your budget. This video was filmed and edited by me, Mark Savage, in May 2022, and I can be found on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter as Coats and Gators.